It's like it doesn't hold up as well when you've watched it a second time, because I think you said this is your first time seeing it, so like this is my second time within a year, and the big reveal at the almost halfway point doesn't have that same feeling. You almost kind of roll your eyes a little bit.
Welcome to Certain Point of View's Another Pass podcast. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. Just go to certainpov.com.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Another Pass podcast. I'm Case Aiken, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Sam Alisea.
Hi.
And today we are going to be looking at a horror movie, and as a result, who better to bring back on than VP Morris?
Hey guys, thanks for having me back.
V, it was so great talking to you about Jennifer's Body. We just knew we had to have you back on, and it seemed like a good time to talk about some horror stuff. I think this is actually going to drop after Halloween per se, but I think people are still in the mood for those kind of things. And it's just great to have you back on, because you wanted to talk about From Dusk Till Dawn, which we were just talking before the show's recorded that I hadn't seen this movie before, and it was kind of a blind spot where I was like, I don't know how I had missed it. So thank you for bringing this as a reason to discuss it.
Yeah, you're welcome. And funny enough, like when I was younger, I got 28 Days Later and this movie like confused. So I like attempted to watch this movie once, but I got it mixed up with the wrong horror movie. And so I was like, wait a minute, this isn't Tarantino. So I'm glad I actually finally have. I mean, I've watched it once before this, but it's like I was way late to the party because I just like my younger brain like flipped them in my head.
Yeah, that's quite the difference there. That is a very British bio-zombie movie versus what is an authentically American vampire story here.
Oh, yeah.
But for people who did not tune into the Jennifer's Body episode, V, why don't you give some quick breakdown about what you do, all the stuff you've got going on?
Yeah, so I'm a horror and thriller writer. I have one novel out now called Shadowcast. You can get that on Amazon as both print or Kindle. And right now, coming up, or actually will be released, a trio of short stories will be coming out right in time for, spooky season. It's called Exit 13, January release, and Legacy Employees. They're separate Kindle short reads, so you can get them on Amazon as well. I also have my own podcast that just wrapped called the Dead Letters Podcast.
Awesome. People should be on the lookout for all of that, especially if they're into horror, but you were a great guest last time, so I think people should just tune into whatever you're working on.
Well, thank you for the endorsement. Yes, not everything is like, pedal to the metal scary. There's some light spooks, so even if they're not a big fan, I think, it's palatable for most people.
I mean, sometimes you need a little spook foreplay, right? You can't just jump into all the spook.
Yeah, although
that's warm up for the scarier stuff.
I kind of wish this movie had jumped into the spook a bit more.
Yeah, this movie is kind of spook foreplay all the way through. Like it's fun once you get to the fun, once you get to the monsters, but it doesn't quite get there, which I appreciated because you guys know I am a coward, which you learned the last time we recorded when we recorded Jennifer's Body. So yeah, this is spooky light, guys. This is definitely more gore than spook, really. And I don't know. There are moments of tension, though. I mean, there are some moments that really work ish.
Yeah, I overall came away liking the movie enough, but it felt like it was very awkwardly constructed. And looking into it, that's a common talking point about the movie in modern criticism and also at the time. Like, all the reviews when this movie came out in, 1996? All of them were just like, it's so weird how this movie basically is two movies mashed together strangely. And for some, that's really cool. But for others, it's kind of jarring. And, man, it's hard to watch this movie knowing what it theoretically is about, only to get to that substance an hour-ish in an hour and 45-minute movie. Like, the dusk part of From Dusk Till Dawn doesn't start until 2/3 of the way in.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really should be named Dawn Till the Other Dawn. It's like...
Yes.
Yeah. a couple of days with a couple of bad dudes. Here's the thing. I said this before we started recording. I'm not a huge fan. of Tarantino in general. So it's just not like usually my thing. I'm not a huge fan of horror. So this movie is definitely out of my wheelhouse of enjoyment. I have to say that I didn't enjoy the first half of the movie. Probably because like things were really creepy with everyone talking to Juliette Lewis and her character. Like that just skeeved me out. There was a lot of creepiness there. But I have to say that painting these two guys as the worst guys and the character that Quentin Tarantino plays as the worst makes his ultimate demise so much better because there is a lovely payoff, which is lovely. So I will say that. I will give that to this movie.
Yeah. Did either of you see Grindhouse, the two-parter that they did I was about to say a couple years back, but it was like 15 years ago
Yes,
now.
yes.
Death Proof and Planet Terror.
Yeah.
What is time?
Yeah, actually, Death Proof is probably either my favorite movie or one of my favorite movies, which is the Tarantino half of Grindhouse, because Planet Terror is the other side that I didn't really care for as much. So, Death Proof, I think, was actually my introduction to Tarantino, and it might be why I have a bit of an affinity for him, because I didn't really come in with a lot of knowledge about some of the quirks about his writing. So it seemed like, oh, so original. And then after watching several of his work by now, I'm just like, oh, I've seen a lot of feet, so I get what he's about.
Yeah. He does get his feet moment in this one, too.
Oh yeah.
Several.
So many
several.
feet.
Yeah, looking at this movie, I don't think I've ever seen a movie that screamed the minds behind it more than the combined efforts of Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez. Like,
yeah.
The script is like, oh, yep, that's a Tarantino script right now. And all the gunplay and the gore, that's a Robert Rodriguez movie right there. Like, and that's why I bring up Planet Terror / Death Proof, Grindhouse, because that was them doing like a double feature, or a fake double feature in that style.
Yeah.
And it felt a lot like this, but this is one movie where you're doing the Death Proof thing up front, and then you're doing the Planet Terror thing at the back, as opposed to having like a fake division between them.
Yeah.
Since I usually, I saw that in theaters when it was a double feature, and I have a hard time mentally breaking them into separate movies, especially with all the fake trailers and everything that went into it all being like, I felt like one big thing to watch together. But there still were divisions, and this movie doesn't have that. It just has a very jarring, all of a sudden, genre shift, an hour into the hour and 45-minute runtime, which I paused when that happened, and I was like, oh, wow, that I assumed there was going to be a lot more of this movie once we got to this whole situation. And it's just strange.
I will be honest with you, the jarring shift was probably my favorite thing about this movie. It was like, yes, now it's time for them to die. I was me, the coward who hates horror. I was very pleased about the shift. I was very pleased. I did know it was coming because my parents talked about it. So even though I've never seen this film, I knew it was happening, and I was like, oh, thank God, the part is coming. This movie's going to change. It's going to change tones now. This is going to be good for me. And it was. I really liked the second movie that was this movie. Not really feeling the first movie, which was just about two brothers, one that was a serial killer and one living in denial about his brother being a serial killer.
I'm going to say I'm not as harsh on this movie. I find the separation kind of surprising. But I was watching the first chunk of this movie, I was like, oh, well, my notes are all mostly positive. I really like the cold open. I think that's a really classic Tarantino kind of suspenseful kind of scene that then turns into Rodriguez style gunplay stuff, which was actually kind of a perfect thesis statement for this movie. That's exactly what their pairing should be doing. But I will say that watching this movie, I couldn't help but think that this is the type of movie that two guys who at this point had mostly been writing and producing movies for festivals would make, because you're going into it relatively blind in that scenario. Whereas the second it becomes a mass market thing, you have to accept the fact that people are going to at least know the genre when you're going into it. The poster for this is covered with bats. It's called From Dusk Till Dawn. You know the title of this movie. You know that it is supposed to be a vampire movie. So you're going to be very confused when you're getting into it, where It's like, oh man, we're like an hour in. Where is the dusk part about this movie? Like, what is going on there? And I think that that's sort of the problem of the film writ large. Like, that it's not a movie meant for people who are just like, who have any sort of awareness of what they're tuning into. Like, you kind of have to go in blind to sort of have that jarring genre shift be effective. Like, I can see why, like, people really dig it. But I kept on thinking, like, man, this movie could use another pass to make it one movie. Like, that's the thing. It's not just one movie, and they're not doing anything to really make it a commercial piece for people to come in and appreciate after the initial release.
Yeah, it's definitely. It's like it doesn't hold up as well when you've watched it a second time, because I think you said this is your first time seeing it, so like this is my second time within a year, and the big reveal at the almost halfway point doesn't have that same feeling. You almost kind of roll your eyes a little bit when it's coming up, because you know that there's this huge shift coming, and it's not, I don't know, taking you off guard the way it does. And I know they weren't thinking full long term, how is this going to hold up in 20 plus years time, because
that's for sure.
Yeah. With a lot of with the dialogue and everything else, that's a nightmare in this. But it's they didn't think that people are going to like have the ability to just kick back at home and rewatch this a bunch of times. It was just like, we need to get the bulk of it, of our watches is coming from theater and maybe some home video purchasing. But like, yeah, I've noticed a lot of movies that have that big, like, I guess, sleight of hand. It just kind of feels like, at least personally for me, I'm like, it wasn't as good the next time around, and the next time around, it's not as fun.
I mean, this movie's like probably a fever dream, right? Like they were sitting around drinking, writing this, adding things, and be like, oh man, you would be great. Okay, all right. So then we have it nice, slow pacing. The tension with this family. They've been kidnapped. They go to this place where they meet, and then bam, sexy dance, and everyone's vampires. Like, and then they're just laughing their ass off. I think like ultimately, like the whole idea is just that first shock and awe, and then I guess you hope that people come back for the enjoying these smaller little gags that you added in, like a gun in a crotch area, or heads being exploded. Like, let's watch the head explode again. I think like maybe that's part of it too. Like there is a element to Tarantino that really loves the idea, well, both of these directors, that loves the idea of like shock and awe. So I think like on some levels, this is just like kind of, I don't think they really thought about if there was going to be a rewatch. They were like, let's just write it the way we want to write it for the first moments.
I got to push back on that, because Tarantino famously was like worked at a video store prior to getting into actually a break in Hollywood. Like, and Rodriguez, like, also famously was like a huge fan of rewatching grindhouse films. Like, that their entire shtick is being fans of movies that have already come and gone. Like, I think that saying that, well, they only anticipated this to be like seen the first time is inaccurate, because they certainly were familiar with the concept of rewatches of movies. I just think that the two of them, both at this point so early in their career, really hadn't kind of grasped the idea of like thinking about how, like, just being aware of what a movie is about before you watch it, in terms of how you construct it. And I mean, like it's interesting to think about, considering that like this isn't a story by Tarantino. He wrote the screenplay, but it's actually a story by Robert Kurtzman, who is a special effects guy who wanted to do a big vampire movie and hired Tarantino to write the screenplay for his big vampire movie. And then they tried to push it as a Tales from the Crypt movie, which was obviously going to be a big vampire movie in that scenario. And instead, Tales from the Crypt did Bordello of Blood, because just at the time, the idea of like a sex worker vampire situation was like in, I guess. So it's so strange to look at all the bones here, because like I said, like the story is like, let's get them to a place where we can do all kinds of cool special effects with vampires, and then the direction is let's do a lot of cool gunplay, and then the script is all right, well, let's have like some cool suspense scenes with some like dialogue that is so fucking cringy. Like I this week, for whatever reason, a lot of the material I've been sort of absorbing has made me sort of like contemplate like the kind of edgelordiness of like the 90s, like a lot of material that's just like, ooh, we're gonna have like a really grim violent thing, or we're gonna say something that's like really over the top just to like surprise a person. For example, for my other show, Men of Steel, I'm rereading Miracle Man, which has like tons of this stuff where it's like let's be as nihilistic as possible in our approach to humanity. At the time when I read it, when I was 16, I was like, this is brilliant. And I'm sure if I'd watched this movie when I was 16, I'd be like, oh, look, like it's so edgy and whatnot. And that's kind of how Tarantino got big in Hollywood. But at the same time, it's like, well, it's both extremely offensive and difficult to listen to. And it's just a different era now than when this movie came out.
I've gotten into a few arguments recently on Reddit about Tarantino. And it seems like anyone who is critiquing him in any way is like instantly accused of being like overly sensitive, even when I'm not like critiquing the content. I'm like the style of it. And this one guy was like, you should have seen it in theaters. We're talking about Pulp Fiction. And I was too. So it was just like, okay, like your whole, like a lot of their whole thing is like, well, you weren't there, man, like it's nom or something. So it's like so yeah, there's like a lot of that, like now, like they were edgelords when they were 16 and now they're like 40 something, and anyone who is younger than them is like critiquing it. They're just like, oh no, you're sensitive and you don't know because you didn't live through it. I'm like, oh, like no, that's not how art works, but okay.
Yeah, I mean, I have a note because they make a lot of racial slurs, and on the one hand, like, it is directed by Robert Rodriguez, so, like, in terms of, like, well, is this actually offensive to, like, a Hispanic American? Like, well, I don't know, but it is also Tarantino who wrote those lines. Like, and oftentimes it's Tarantino saying those lines, too.
Also, internalized racism exists, and also there is a divide between, like, those people who have more colonizer blood in them. It's my nice way of saying it. And then indigenous or other. So like Rodriguez's family is fairly wealthy. Like there is a social economic divide where some people are okay with certain things. So it's still questionable.
And it's definitely not good for anyone who has Down syndrome. At least that's what I'm assuming the person that they are referring to has in the first scene. And that took me back because I have not heard that slur in a very long time. So I almost was just like, are they referring to an Asian person? I was like, oh, wait, no, it's even worse. Oh, God.
Yeah. I had to pause because I was like, wait. Did I just read that? Because I always watch stuff with subtitles. And I was like, did I just read Did I read that? Oh, my God. And, well, you guys know, I mean, I'm not going to mince words. HBO Max, I mean, come on. Like, fix the app. Like, why is rewinding so hard? But all I'm saying is, like, I was just like, wow, this is, yeah. Okay, wow. That I haven't heard in, I mean... I think I read it in a book once from the 1930s.
Yeah, that's real bad. And I mean, like, there is the element of all of these are supposed to be bad people. Like, no, none of the good people are saying some of these things that are so shocking. And most of them get their just desserts. Or at the very least, you know, Clooney's sort of the one exception. And he is both sort of better than those, and also is offset by the fact that he is directly confronted by like vampires, so who are like presented very much as like an even worse kind of hellish monster, where it's like, all right, here's the good people and they're being kind of protected by a terrible person, but they're being protected from something even worse.
Yeah, I definitely I like that Tarantino is the one that like gets turned into a vampire, because like it shows that his character is like the worst one. He like a figurative monster turns into a literal monster. So I enjoyed that symbolism because I was afraid at my first viewing that it was like, oh, they're all like just gonna literally turn into vampires and that's how it ends. But that's not how it ends. So thankfully I was expecting it to be more like, oh, isn't this edgy? They're all vampires, but thankfully it's actually just one of the original crew gets turned that way. Or at least we see it.
I do think that it's a nice moment when when basically Tarantino's character is being held by all the other people, and George Clooney, who is looking at his brother, tells him that he's going to give him the peace in death that he could not give him in life, because there is like still a sense of kindness in that killing, and maybe his brother didn't deserve it, but there is brotherly love there between the two of them regardless. And he made the right call, so I was glad that he wasn't just stupid. There was a little tension there where he thought maybe he wouldn't be smart about it, but ultimately he was, so that was good. I thought that was a good move.
I can't fully remember it, but I think, are there other actual like vampires holding him down?
No, it's the guy from Nam and the biker. He introduces himself as Sex Machine.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
No, he's not just introduced as Sex Machine. He's credited as Sex Machine. He doesn't have another name, and the biker is named Frost.
Yeah. That's
Yeah. Those side notes. So you mentioned the original crew. That's actually one of the other things that I find kind of weird about the structure of this movie, which is that we actually have more people as part of these are the people holding out inside the place, like held by vampires, like under siege by vampires. And two of them don't show up until an hour into the movie, are fairly compelling once they do show up, and then but they're going to die because they're not part of that original crew right there. So there's like no suspense in terms of like, oh, well, I guess, all right, well, that guy's gone. Like, it just seems weird that in an ensemble piece about being laid siege to by vampires, much like a Night of the Living Dead, you don't spend time with these characters, like with all the characters. We're only spending time with this like one like subsection of it, getting into it. And that makes like that final like push to the end feel rushed as a result, because like you don't have other characters that you're really that invested in.
And it seems like the two brothers are like kind of collecting characters as they go on, which I mean, I understand it's like their arc, but they had the hostage and then stuff happens. And then they meet the family, and then they're trying to get them across the border. Then now they meet like new people in the bar, and there's like a douchey bartender that you think maybe is he someone to care about, but no, not really. And then there's the Sex Machine and Frost, and then there's like the sexy dancers that obviously are just props, but it's like are like, I thought maybe one of the women would like maybe knew them or something. I was like kind of waiting for there to be a bigger reveal that like, oh, one of these women like there's something, but no, there's not. So it's just like, yeah, there isn't enough time to really figure out like who is the people that we care about all the way, and like who's good in this kind of like bar of horrible people.
Yeah. And there's also not a real bad guy. Like, you kind of get the vibe that like Salma Hayek is supposed to be like the head vampire woman there. Like she's named this like crazy Santanico pandemonium. Like it's this like crazy kind of thing. She's got like snakes, and she's has like a show stopping kind of number, and there's pyrotechnics when the band is playing about her. And she has a whole speech, but then she dies pretty early on, and then like the rest of it's just like, oh yeah, there are bats that turn into vampires that are attacking them, but there's no actual antagonist. It's just the situation.
I also want to say that this movie is a PSA for vampires not to own disco balls.
Yes.
I think like if there's a real lesson to learn from this film, it's that if you are a vampire, do not install a disco ball in your apartment or castle.
I gotta say though, I thought that was a really cool way to deal with them at the very end.
No, it was amazing. That was great. But I'm just saying, I like actually thought to myself, I actually put in my notes, if turned vampire, do not own disco ball. Reflective surface is bad.
Yes.
Or own biker bar in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like a biker bar, like truckers and bikers go missing all the time. I mean, it's actually like a pretty good idea. Like, not necessarily totally bad. Good on the vampires. Got to build a business model to sustain yourself. But yeah, they didn't check hard enough on these particular people, I think, really. They needed better security out front.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, well, they just figured, like, well, everyone's gonna... We'll kill them regardless, like...
Yeah.
Yeah, and they got let in on like a technicality. It's because he owns an RV and has to have a truck license. It's like, oh, that's not. You're not even really a trucker. So, just like they slip in there. But I mean, I think that's obviously the thing is that you think that this innocent family is like the ones like if they're gonna kill, you know, like truckers and bikers who have a reputation for being pretty hard, that like an old man who's an ex-preacher and his children are going to be like, you know, the easiest people to kill, and that's not like clearly that's not the case.
Although maybe if he found out that he was a man of God, he would have sent him away right away. Oh no, get out of here. How dare you? I'm insulted.
Yeah, and like Juliette Lewis is wearing a cross necklace. I'm surprised they all didn't like notice / freak out upon seeing it, but that just kind of it's just seen when Tarantino's character is like staring at her that she's wearing it, and then it's never addressed again, which I thought, or is it addressed towards the end? I can't remember now.
Well, she uses it to kill someone.
Yeah, she uses it to kill someone at the end. Yes, I was like, I just thought when they would walk into the bar, wouldn't they just like have their spidey senses up that she has religious paraphernalia on her? But I guess not.
I mean, again, they're just not good at security.
Yeah. Although I did dig the whole, like, they've got this, like, temple kind of thing that is, like, half exposed. I thought the closing shot was really cool, where we have, like, the canyon that's, like, filled up with, like, just trucks that they've pushed over the edge to dispose of the evidence. And, you know, it's just this, like, trap for all these people. I thought that whole setup was a really cool idea that was unfortunate that it wasn't more of the movie.
Yeah. Well, it gives you also a sense that this is a more, like, tied to a more ancient civilization. I mean, vampires are already ancient, but like they're living outside of they've basically built their bar on top of their pyramid that was hidden under like the ground here, and so like that's kind of amazing. But yeah, that's just kind of like, I don't know if you're supposed to have like an oh shit moment, like maybe there's more inside kind of thing, or it's very unclear. It's just a very cool shot.
Yeah, I've heard people say that the ending shot is like what makes the movie for them. And my like I guess personal take is I think that they're implying that this is a form of blood sacrifice, that the like indications like those temples were used to make human sacrifices back when the Mayan civilization was functional. And it's like they obviously can't keep doing that because time has changed. So now it's like they have to like to continue doing that, they have to make this kind of like almost honey trap for their blood sacrifice.
Which is a cool idea. Again, like the pitch of the movie, like the idea of like, all right, we're going to do a big vampire thing where it is this like trap where people get sucked inside under like the pretense of like titillation, only to be all murdered by, you know, sexy vampire women. That's a cool idea if you're selling a concept of a movie. It's then just very strange that like what should like also the title makes you just feel like it should be this like, oh god, we're like just barely making it through the night again, like Night of the Living Dead, where it spends a little bit of time to get them to the house and then there's zombies all outside coming through. And I don't know, like there's no one scene that I'm like, oh, I dislike this scene. It's just there's so much before we get to the premise that it feels like we're just kind of dilly-dallying, and then we're there. And I like all of those. I would say probably some of the stuff with Tarantino in it, like as Richie Gecko, like being this like weird, you know, rapist character, like a rapist murderer character. Like there's probably too much of that, considering that I wish we had more later. You know, because like how much does it actually impact the later part of the story? Like, if the story starts at the hour marker when they go into the bar, how like there isn't a whole lot of that really influences things. It informs the character, sure. It makes us like very fine with him dying, but you know, like I said, I like the opening scene. I really like the border crossing scene. Like that's a really cool sequence right there. That's like good suspense of them like trying to hide in the RV. But like when I look back on like actually what happens throughout this whole movie up until they get to the bar, it doesn't feel like it should take an hour.
Yeah. I mean, I think like killing the hostage while George Clooney, I never remember any characters' names. I'm sorry, everyone. George Clooney's character is away, and is fine. I think that it shows like a fundamental difference between the two of them, but it does go on. Like there are other things that go on a little long. So yeah, I think like some of it needed to be tightened up.
And I have tons of thoughts about how you can make that tighter without even really necessarily cutting anything. Like you might trim down some scenes, but like without like I think some of it's just that it's a long pace to get there, and like I think you could make it work. But before we get to pitches, I had one other big thing. Up until they're all on the RV together, did you two just assume that Harvey Keitel's wife was going to be the person that they killed when they were getting away from their bank robbery?
No, I don't think so.
No.
Really? I like because they talked about how that there was like one woman who was like killed, and they like even show her at one point. And it's not the one that they have as a hostage. And I just kept assuming because they keep on talking about that, and they then keep on talking about how the mom just died recently. And I kept on just assuming it was going to be like, oh. And like I realized that's like kind of a hacky screenplay kind of move, so I'm glad it wasn't. But the way they kept talking about it in close proximity when going back and forth between the Gecko brothers and then the family, I just kept getting that vibe that it was like, oh, it's going to be revealed that like, oh, they already have a connection because when at one point when George Clooney was doing a bank robbery, he accidentally murdered or this innocent bystander was killed as collateral damage, and that's why this man has lost his faith.
Yeah, I mean I didn't think of it. But it does make sense.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that does make sense now that I think about it. But no, I thought it was just like they, especially Seth's character, likes to kind of poke at weaknesses, and I just saw it as like a sore spot. Because especially like when they're driving to the thing, he kind of like is going through the wallet and looking at all the pictures and like making comments and like keeps probing for like, oh, she's dead. Where is she? What's going on? What happened? Like, I just saw it as like more, I don't know, proof that he is not a great person.
Which is all fine. Obviously, very different person. Tom Savini, who plays Sex Machine in this. I couldn't stop thinking about how he kind of looks like Brian O'Halloran, who was Dante in Clerks. And I know that they're just very different people. But this is also about the same time that Clerks hit Sundance, and this is all Miramax. You know, it's all like the same like family of like of Harvey Weinstein produced projects. Just so we can say that part out loud. And it's obviously not. But in my head, I was just thinking like I'm not even supposed to be here today every single time, and I thought it was really funny.
Actually, one of the honestly the I'm not even supposed to be here moment for him is the moment where he has hidden the fact that he has a bite, and he's like trying to hide the fact that he's going through transformation, and he's got his hands in front, and like all of a sudden like the vampire claws start growing down, and he like basically very quickly hides them behind his back, and like the son like almost catches it, like he like looks over and he's like standing there like, you know, kind of giving like a doo-doo-doo kind of face, and the kid looks away and he feels like he's gotten away with it, and that was actually a lovely moment of Dante-ness, actually.
Yeah. Well, and it's offset because it's like that. This is one of the funniest moments in this, where where Frost is like describing his experience of Vietnam, and everyone is enraptured by it, but you don't hear any of it because you're just focusing on Sex Machine transforming into a vampire this whole time, and you just keep on cutting back, and he's doing these like really like aggressive physical actions trying to illustrate what the Nam was like, but we never actually hear anything about the actual experience.
Yeah. And meanwhile, this guy's like panicking in the corner as he's transforming, trying to hide it from everyone.
Yeah. I don't know if it might have been maybe it was just me moment, but at both times I've watched this movie, the moment right before we see that he is growing teeth, Frost is telling his Vietnam story, and you can still hear it right before it like cuts out, and like he kind of makes this like shock face, like almost, and there's like a bunch of music that's kind of like that swells, and I thought for a minute that he was attracted to Frost. It was kind of like the same face that Richie makes when he sees the dancers for the first time, and before, so it's like a weird shift because we're switching now to his perspective, and I kind of like almost was expecting, with like that face he makes and the music swelling, I was like, is he checking out Frost, and then I realize he's trying to hide the fact that he's turning into a vampire while this guy is talking about how he just like bludgeons his enemies to death. So that's the tension. But it was one of those it seemed like the spotlight was like shifting to Frost, and like if it was a woman, like especially an attractive woman, it would be like a cue up for like, oh, this guy is attracted to her. But it was like, oh no, this guy is now like afraid of this guy because he's gonna hunt me.
Yeah.
Well, you're kind of primed for it because earlier when they're talking about, oh, these vampires are so soft, not like this, like, and he like pats Frost and is like I forget what the exact line, but it's like not like this hard, massive muscle or whatever. Side note, Fred Williamson, who played Frost, was a football player before this, and his nickname was the Hammer, like just a mountain of a man. I think us watching this now versus like at the time, I think viewers at the time would be like, oh yeah, that's like, would recognize him as a famous football player and be like, oh yeah, it's that guy. He of course he can beat up vampires. He's like this huge like this huge football player. Kind of like if well, I was gonna say kind of like Schwarzenegger movies, if he like just shows up in a scene or something, but or like The Rock. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's weird talking about this movie from the standpoint of like production issues and so forth, because like it's Rodriguez, who is famous for shooting everything super low budget, getting everything super fast. Like the production time on this movie was incredibly quick. So there's like really impressive works that go into it all. That said, the screenplay was written pretty early on. Like it's Tarantino's first like paid screenplay, and you know, so it was all written well before he got famous, and you can kind of feel that this is like kind of a freshman script.
Yeah, for sure. It's after you watch more Tarantino, you see that these ideas are just getting flushed out way better than they are in this movie.
But that's all I've got but without just like wanting to like jump into pitches, because like I have thoughts about how to make this better. But do either of you have anything else you want to talk about with this movie? Because I overall I rather liked it. It's again I think it fits together wrong, but there's no scene that I was like absolutely annoyed that was there. There were lines that I was absolutely annoyed that were there, but there was no like scene that I thought was a bad choice.
The only thing is, I kind of wish that Stefan from SNL could like make a pitch for going to the bar from Dusk Till Dawn to the Titty Twister. I could just see him being like, "This club has everything." Dick guns, tequila foot shots, vampires, strippers. It's the next up and coming things. Like, I just wish that. Like, I don't know.
I mean,
they should have done that.
Crotch guns.
Promo. Yeah, crotch guns.
I think crotch guns at like I think this bar would have Stefan at crotch gun. Like, I think like that would be his biggest selling point.
Yeah.
This bar does have everything.
Yeah, it does sound like, that's the thing, is like when you list out everything that is in this bar, even before you know that there's vampires, it's just insane. And it's like, if it wasn't the context of these, you know, two filmmakers, you would just have been like, okay, yeah, sure, this is a movie.
Yeah.
It's like that meme.
Yeah, the crotch gun is revealed before any actual threats occur. That crotch gun, by the way, was in Desperado before it, and they weren't able to make it work for a scene. And then this movie's like a little less... Not that Desperado is like a serious movie or a realistic movie, but like this movie's just like a hair further into camp. And so it was just like, yeah, fuck it, let's use it.
And they didn't use it once. They used it twice. Once to threaten and once to shoot. So they made it work. They used it.
It's Chekhov's crotch gun, obviously.
Yeah. Bucket list complete.
Yeah. Yeah, I read Rodriguez's book, Rebel Without a Crew, a while back, and he talked about this was one of just like a lot of projects he picked up right after the success of El Mariachi. So I think Desperado came out first, but this may have been filmed like simultaneously or really close together. And all of this is in this like flurry of just like new talent in Hollywood, just trying to get all their stuff out there. And so like there's a lot of passion going into this movie. It's like I said, just it feels like it has a bunch of like rookie mistakes because they're all rookies. So why don't we take a break, have a shout out to one of the shows on our network, and when we come back, let's speculate on how this movie could have been a little bit tighter.
Yeah.
Hey there, Screen Beans. Have you heard about Screen Snark? Rachel, this is an ad break. They aren't screen beans until they listen to the show.
Fine. Potential screen beans. You like movies and TV shows, right?
I mean, who doesn't? Screen Snark is a casual conversation about the movies and television shows that are shaping us as we live our everyday lives.
That's right, Matt. We have a chat with at least one incredible guest every episode, hailing from all walks. We've interviewed chefs,
Writers, costumers, musicians,
yoga teachers, comedians, burlesque dancers,
folks in the film and TV industry,
and more.
We'd be delighted for you to join us every other Monday on the Certain POV Podcast Network.
Or wherever you get your podcasts, fresh and tasty off the presses.
What? That's not...
Can I call them screen beans now?
Fine.
Screen beans.
So tune in and we'll see you at the movies or on a couch somewhere.
'Cause you're all screen beans now.
She will be mine.
And we're back. So, I have been informed by Sam that I am not allowed to lead off on pitches. So
You're just so thought out. I mean, like, honestly, if you're just leading on pitches, what do I do? What do I do?
But V, you are our guest, so would you like to take the first swing?
Yes. So I have two ideas. I'll say one first, and if the second one is like really different from you guys, then maybe we can go back to it. It's to kind of start the movie around the border crossing with obviously, a little bit of backstory to understand why the tension is there. So we don't even get the slur-ridden opening of this movie with the shootout and the booze store catching on fire and the hostage being slaughtered. It's just starting with like this poor family kind of being hijacked and taken across the border with, obviously some backstory that these guys are bad dudes, but we don't need to know as much as is presented in the original script. And then it's kind of, it's a kind of common trick I've seen in a lot of movies where, clearly there's something wrong, but they're presenting normal. Like when the waiter comes by, everyone's smiling, but the guy has a gun under the table. Like it's seen in tons of movies, like all the genres of like even Westerns, more, crime dramas or even horror movies where it's like everyone under the threat of violence has to kind of put on a good face, and like other people are kind of, like the waitress comes by and everyone's all smiling like, oh yeah, it's fine, but like then as soon as she's gone, there's a lot of tension because they're being held there against their will. And then you can kind of from there I would get into some more like flashbacks in a similar style of how when we see Seth come back from getting the burgers and he has all those crazy flashes of seeing the female hostage who's been brutalized, kind of like that with all the other like crazy shit they've done, not just the scenes that we get in the original, but maybe to their original crimes of robbing banks in the past of like, we're kind of getting a, through their interactions, we get to learn more and kind of have things trigger these, they're almost like PTSD related flashes. I mean, I know it's happening in the moment, but it could be kind of displayed that Seth is like so upset by how he's had to take care of his brother that like mentioning like, oh, hey, do you remember when we robbed that one bank? And it could be like that kind of crazy like flashback to, oh yeah, that happened and that was like really messed up. And we can kind of do the same thing, maybe, with less because we don't really care as much about the nice family, but we get to learn, like the mom is dead that way, or, just like their general relationship and questioning, like it happens in the motel. They question why the adopted son is Asian and they're not Asian. So like you can kind of get could explain everything. And like, like when the waitress comes back to take their order, like everyone like stops doing that and they all pretend that they're like the best of friends. And maybe that even like since all the waitresses from at least what I guess are vampires are maybe like stalking them that way, that they're kind of gathering information that, oh, we know that like, this place is going to turn into a bloodbath at a certain, after the big striptease. So it's like kind of painting a mark on them from the beginning that this like, earlier femme fatale who was like a waitress is like sussing them out and kind of marking them to be like maybe their first kills of the night, because like an older man and his younger children are like, a better victims than like the two tough guys. And then that kind of gets turned on their head. And I definitely would keep the loss of faith that is happening with the pastor. That was one of my favorite parts, and like how the existence of vampires like approves his faith, even though it kind of means horrible consequences for him and humanity and as a whole. But it's I definitely wanted that part to stay and get more time, with those other characters that we talked about with Frost and Sex Machine and other people. Which, just side note, I love that Frost is like trying to build a little like table thing as the strippers are dancing, and he gets mad every time it gets knocked down. So I loved that, and I definitely would not get rid of that. But yeah, like maybe that Frost and Sex Machine like interact with the family crew, the two brothers and the hostage family more, and like maybe even just like shoot the shit a little more, just like kind of like the conversation that was in the original opening with, obviously, hopefully way less offensive language, but just how they were like talking about nothing. There's just like two guys like bonding. And that's like what happens at bars, especially bars like this, if there's not like a fight going on. Like, I don't think anyone was having a deep conversation at any of those other tables we saw. They're all just like, talking crap. So I kind of wish that we could see like how Seth and Richie would interact with these other like tough guys before there's a clear and present danger. And then I would definitely make the vampires far more formidable. I mean, part of it is the CGI was just crap back then, and that's not anybody's fault. But I was kind of annoyed that like two human guys can like kill tons of these people, well, vampires that are like probably hundreds, if not thousands of years old. And like a part of it felt like there was a little bit of sexism because most of them were female. So like there's obviously, some that were harder to kill than others, but it seemed like as soon as it was revealed that, they're vampires, they were just, knocking them down left and right until they, eventually kind of sequestered themselves in there to realize it. But it's like, yeah, of course these two tough guys can just like kill a bunch of supernatural women. It just seems like they would almost like kind of grr, and then they would just drive a stake through their heart. It was like, all bark and no bite. I just wanted, I guess, them to have some of their badassery, like at least called into question a little bit. Especially there's that one scene where they kill 4 vampire women with a table, with like each leg through the table. And while that's like a really cool shot, I was just like I think like even Edward Cullen would be more formidable than those 4 women. Like, make them at least like, sure, they're presenting very terrifying, but it just didn't seem like much of a task until they're, getting towards the end where it's, they're starting to really get ganged up upon by tons of them. But yeah, I just like wanted to feel like I never thought that, with the first, few vampires they run into were going to be much of a threat just because, like main character syndrome. And then obviously keeping the disco ball, because we can't get rid of that. That's 100% good. And
absolutely.
And it totally skipped over it. Of course, like, I almost didn't want, like, I'm glad Richie got turned into a vampire because of the poetics of, like, a literal monster. I mean, a figurative monster turning into a literal one. But I almost just kind of wish he was just, like, stabbed like the punk he is. Just, like, it just seemed... yeah, it just seemed like he just didn't deserve, like, that's a cool death, so to speak. Like being turned into this supernatural being and then having your brother have to like mercy kill you when like in reality, like, he is such a shit human being. He deserves like a pitiful, like, lame death, not one that would be in a action movie, which I understand this is, a part action movie. And I would also make the character design a little less lizardy to me, just from my own like horror sensibilities. I'm not afraid of that type of monster. Like it just doesn't scare me. I kind of get that it makes sense because they're in the desert and lizards can survive in the desert very well. So it makes sense that, some of the vampire creature design would be melded with like the animals of that era or area. But I was not scared of them. And I wish that they had done something to make their creature design better or something like a little bit. And maybe it's because it happened so fast that, she just turns from being a stripper into this lizard vampire. I kind of wish it was like a creepier thing. And also like the whole pacing of it would be, which goes against the kind of Tarantino feel, would be much slower. That it's kind of more of a slower build to what's really happening. Because, in the horror / like suspense genre, there's a lot of that. And that's where I come from. And my preference is like a slower build with like hints of there being problems that just kind of continue to swell versus this kind of like rock and roll, like, look at how crazy this bar is. There's a guy talking about pussy when we walk in the door. So I would have him. I was listening to some other podcast talk about this, and they were saying that like at first that guy, I call him the pussy barker because it's like a carnival barker, but for prostitution. Yeah. So it's like the first few times he says it, like the first like, I don't know, like 2 lines, it's kind of funny because it's like out of nowhere, like, oh my God, look how insane this guy is. But then he keeps going.
Yeah, plus it's Cheech Marin in his second of 3 parts. Yeah. And you're like, okay, yeah, like, it's a comedic actor, like, cool, all right.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I get what they're doing, but it kind of goes on too long. And that's the thing is, it kind of gets awkward after, like, the shock factor of him just, like, describing various types of women's genitalia. The shock gets kind of lost, and it just like went on way too long, and it goes from being funny and even edgy to just being annoying. So I would still have him, but I would definitely like cut that part down, and and make the whole thing less like, oh, look at all this crazy shit that's happening in this place, more of this like slower build, like something's wrong here and we need to figure it out, and then eventually fight to survive. But I would keep the band shifting from normal instruments to dead bodies. And I want to know, like, do they have those like pre-made, like saved back for when the kills happen, that they just like bring it out? Or did they make that human guitar within like 2 minutes of shit hitting the fan at the bar? Like it just happened so fast, which I enjoyed that type, but it was just like, oh, that was really quick if you just killed that person.
Yeah, which is like, that makes them multi-talented at that point. Mm-hmm. It's like, wow, you can play an instrument and make one out of human flesh. You are incredible.
Yeah, and tune it.
Yeah. That would actually be a kind of hilarious scene. They're not even playing it. They're just like trying to like get the tuning right. They're just like, wait, hold on. Is this the G string or is this the E? Does that sound like E sharp to you? It's like,
oh God, and then you can make a G string.
Yeah, they could make a G string joke in there. Yeah.
Hey, listen, I feel like now we're casting Bruce Campbell. I mean, like, we're going in a totally different direction, but I like it.
Yeah, I think that has a lot of similarities to stuff that I was thinking about, because I think we're pretty clear on like some of the structural issues of this. Like, I think we're all like in sync on that part. I like that all. I don't want to go too far into it because then I'm going to just turn into doing mine. Sam, why don't you go?
So I went in definitely a similar direction because for me, like I said, I really didn't like the first half of this film. So I thought that they could actually start like as Rich is getting back, or as I'm just going to call him George Clooney. George Clooney's getting back with the burgers. And so you start with like listening to like a radio thing about like, kind of like a voiceover, but it's all off a radio, talking about the bank robbers and their descriptions and that kind of thing. And you have him come back with the burgers and he's like, what the fuck did you do? And then you see the hostage, and then he has that moment where you kind of, have him confronting his brother, being like, this is not what we do. You're not fucking raping people and murdering them. So you still have that moment of like, so you see how the two of them are different. And at the same time, you're kind of cutting back and forth to the family, which is just out on the road, just kind of, going on vacation. And the kids can still be like, I don't understand why we have to go on vacation, blah, 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 blah. I think an important scene, and I would leave it in, is the scene where Juliette Lewis is asking her father about his job and taking it. That way you establish that he is a pastor. But everything else, I would then have them meet at the motel, have them kidnapped, and straight to the border. Like, I would somehow work all that out, because I don't think you need that first scene at all. You can start hot and heavy, and, like, honestly, like, because he murdered someone, they have to leave the motel, right? So you just get them going, and then get straight to, like, past the border and into this small town, and, not knowing where to go, and kind of maybe have someone, like, hint at them that they should, like, maybe not go to the place that they're thinking about going, or, like, it's got a reputation, and, the person, George Clooney's character is telling the person to mind their own business, and they walk away. But that gets you to the bar really a lot quicker. And then I would say, yes, the pastor can kind of ease things down, but I think it's like one of the other guys, maybe Frost or Sex Machine, that should come over and kind of barter with the bartender to have the family stay. And this is how they kind of sit down with them, become friends with them, sort of, let me buy you a drink kind of thing. Maybe even have like some beginnings of nom storytelling that people check out of, kind of, like tall tales being told. That way you just get like more of that moment. I agree with VP. I kind of would like a more punk ass way for Quentin Tarantino to die. I do like him turning into a monster though. So I'm very conflicted now after hearing her pitch. But I thought another way was that he could actually be lured to the bathroom or to the back somewhere, still within the bar because it's closed, and kind of like think that he's going to get the better of one of the dancers and kind of have them turn on him. And I know this means that Tarantino does not get his feet moment. I'm really sorry. He does not get to drink tequila or whatever off of Selma Hayek's feet, but I just think that it's like he's such a predator that I think that it would be like they're having a good time, they're shooting the shit with these other guys. His brother's telling him to like calm down, because maybe he can even have like sort of like words with one of the others. Maybe Sex Machine, right? Maybe he has words with the crotch guy. We can still put crotch gun guy in there, right? We still have crotch gun show. Like maybe like, and George Clooney's like, calm down. And he's like, all right, I'm going to go to the bathroom. And he sees one of the dancers off the floor, and he decides to follow her. And, he's going to do his creepy ass shit that he does, because we know that he's a rapist. We know that he's a murderer. He's been still being creepy with Juliette Lewis's character. And maybe he does just get bitten there, and then he does come back and become a vampire. But I think it's that moment that seals his deal. And that's like the first inkling that like something's really fucking wrong. Like she like grabs him in like into a stall, but like the doors close and then you hear him scream, like not like that kind of thing. So you don't see what happened, but you see him return. And then you can still have Selma Hayek come out, do a dance. You can still have him sit there, right? He's kind of he's hiding his bite. Selma Hayek's doing her sexy thing with the snake. And I think you can have him turn like and be the first thing to turn, like, oh shit. And then people be like, oh fuck. And then everyone start running. And then like other dancers turn because they realize like something's giving it away. And like, then you have mayhem like ensue. And you can still have him killed, and you can have him killed by someone else, like not even his brother, because he's killed in the first half because he turned into a fucking monster. And then basically like the rest of it is just like the mayhem that happens within the bar. And that's how I'd fix it. I would just fix the whole first half of the movie and do a small build-up. Casey, your turn.
Yeah, I think we're all kind of in similar spots because this movie, ironically, is a good candidate for like kind of a Tarantino-esque structure that it actually doesn't have. Like to do like a Reservoir Dogs or like a Pulp Fiction, like we're going to move around in time or have a big jump cut kind of thing. Like it doesn't happen in this movie, and that actually I think is to its detriment. I really like the border crossing scene, and it would be difficult to have that be a flashback and still get the tension from that scene. So I'm not sure about how to necessarily like. Either that could become like the cold opening, but I do like the cold opening as it is. I think that aside from the slurs, I think that overall it works pretty well to sort of set up the type of vibe that we're going to get, especially because we're getting both the Tarantino style dialogue in all of that, and then also the gunplay. Like I think that like the way Clooney solves the situation by like shooting or like having his brother shoot out the bottles and then lighting the toilet paper roll on fire and tossing that. I think that's really good there. I think that shows creativity that will pay off later. I think we get a lot of the sense of what the movie's going to be like. And I am a little worried about having it like be like that and then cut to the family in the camper or something like that and then reveal that they're inside too. Because I think that all of a sudden the two scenes are really similar. Like if you cut out everything in between. So I would still probably keep a certain amount of time to get to them to the bar. I would open basically the same cold opening. We get the grindhousey kind of like title crawl that they're doing because that's the type of movie they're trying to make. We get maybe add a line where like while they're driving being like, are you hungry? I could eat. So that we then cut to them, or like we cut to Harvey Keitel and his family arriving. We can have some of that dialogue. We can establish the whole like lost our faith kind of element. We can get those kind of vibes. We're all saying the same thing here. I realize that.
Yeah.
we get that vibe. They arrive. Maybe they only pull into the burger spot, or maybe they pull into the hotel. Like let's say they pull into the hotel because Keitel is talking about how tired he is, which couldn't pay off very well if he's exhausted and that carries through for the rest of the movie there. There's like he never gets that nap or anything. So they arrive, almost immediately get taken hostage by Clooney and Tarantino. And this way we can set up that what happened to their previous hostage in flashes rather than having to do it like the way that it's cut in that scene where he comes in and walks in on them or walks in on the body. Like we could have that be like, I heard the news. I thought you had a hostage. And then we can show flashes of that while they like arrive at the border crossing. I say get them into the town, have them try to figure out where the bar is. And I would like to have people talk about being like, oh, I pass that bar all the time. I've never gone in. Like, I think that needs to be a really clear detail because that's like the bar has to be a thing that everyone knows about, but has never actually investigated. Because that's why Cheech Marin number 3 said like you should go to that bar because I've passed it a billion times. No one ever really pays any attention to it. Like it has to really feel like a hole in the wall. So there can be like a little bit of a search for it as the sun is setting. Get them to the bar, and then we can then do some of those flashbacks. They arrive. I had the same thought about like champagne room situations or whatever it is, like whatever the girls are doing, like have them pull guys away. To sort of like get, start seeding the crowd with already made vampires or have people just disappear. Like the bar is starting to thin out and we don't know why. We're not really watching it. Like you can start setting up a vibe that like, oh, shit's going down. Like we, the audience, can be getting like little bits and pieces that things are bad. When the like, sure, keep the bouncer, the barker and the bartender coming in to like face them off. And when they all pull guns, have everyone in the bar pull guns. Like, this should be a bar full of, like, crazy people who are all armed and scary. And then that's when it's just, like shoots one of them, basically the same way that it plays out. But have a few more people survive initially. Like, when it's revealed that they're all vampires, we're immediately down to the family, the Gecko brothers, and then Frost and Sex Machine. I think they need to all be ones who survive a little bit longer. Like we established Sex Machine and Frost early as being named characters, but we should have some red shirts in this group that we can dwindle down because I don't think Salma Hayek's character should die immediately. Or we need to have like some, like either she needs to be like the master vampire, or we need something like a blood altar or something like some sort of source of vampirism there to give, so that there's either a main bad guy or a big reason why they're there. Because at once they kill all the vampires that are in the room and they're like, oh, we just hear the bats outside. Why are they under siege necessarily? Like, I get that the vampires want to kill them and that they're offended that these people came and did shit, but like from a cost benefit analysis, like all they did is end up killing themselves. Like they all die. Like all the vampires killed themselves, like throwing themselves at Clooney and co. because they're all very soft, and they comment on that they're all very soft. And V, that was a problem for you, that they're very soft. Like, I think that Salma Hayek should be not soft. I think she should be really tough and scary. Like, I think that works really well. And if you don't want to have her on set for most of this time, like, have her be in her weird snake form. Have fucking snakes everywhere, because, like, that's, like, I didn't think she was a lizard. I thought she was a snake. And she's got the snake when she comes in. And I think snakes are equally creepy and could be all like slithering around and coming in through weird holes, and they're having to like cut their heads off and shit. Like, and maybe cutting their heads off. Actually, we know for a fact that in this movie, cutting heads off doesn't kill the vampire. So that can be part of the thing. Like, they're actually, yeah, they might be easy to wound, but difficult to kill. And I think that they should be sort of fleeing, and they're like, how, like, they go down into the basement. How fucking big is this basement? And we eventually, at the end of the movie, see how big this basement is. It's a huge temple. But at first, it's just, like, we never get that vibe. They're just, like, constantly trying to pull back deeper and deeper into the bar structure. And we shouldn't see stuff that necessarily tips the hand that it's this big temple, but we should get the vibe that it's huge. Like, that it's downstairs, it's massive. As they are pulling back, we lose a bunch of bikers. They pull back, we lose a bunch of bikers. They pull, you know, they get to a safe spot. That's when we lose Sex Machine and Frost. You know, build all that out, make it a bit more, because like my understanding is that the original script that Tarantino wrote was basically the bar stuff, and then it was like, this is not a full screenplay, and wrote out the whole front part in his normal style, which is why it feels like such a like two different scripts like just stitched together. It's like, all right, well, here's like the prequel movie for all this. And I think we should race to get to the bar. And as we're all saying, once we're at the bar, tell some stories for the characters. Find out more about Frost. Find out more about Sex Machine. Find out, you know, we can reveal more of the details. We can actually do the stuff about like what happened to that first hostage, the one that was in their car. You know, we're all saying the same thing here, because it is, I think, very obvious that this movie could have just integrated those two, like the two sets, like sides of it, like the stuff leading up to them getting to the bar and the bar stuff together, so that like the sun sets and it's dusk 30 minutes into the movie rather than an hour into the movie. And even if for 30 minutes we're not actually like dealing with the vampire stuff, we're just like cutting back to the morning or to the daytime and seeing the shit that got them all into this bar. At the very least, we're at the dusk part of From Dusk Till Dawn, so that then the you know, the survival till dawn matters, because it's like, what, like 8 o'clock when the sun actually sets, sometime, assuming it's like summerish there. So yeah, all right, that's a lot of hours that they have to survive. And if Keitel is really tired, we can like set up those vibes. You know, we can have stuff that happens to really feel like it, because as it is, I was shocked when it like, oh, it's dawn now, because it hadn't been that much time that we'd seen them on screen at night. Like it felt like they'd only been there a couple of hours, as opposed to like 8 hours, you know? But like I said, I kind of feel like we're all kind of in the same space here. Like we need to get to that bar a little bit sooner, and we can tell some of the information once we get to the bar, because they need to feel like they're trapped in the space, and we need to feel like we're living in the space for a while.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good point about the amount of time passage, because like, you know, it's the title is From Dusk Till Dawn, and that's the thing, is like you kind of forget how long it's been. Like there's no way of them, like there's never a time like mentioning like, oh, it's midnight or oh whatever, so that you kind of mentally can keep in the back of your head like they've got this amount of time left. It just seems, yeah, like we don't really get a feel for how long do they have to keep doing this for.
No one has a watch.
Yeah.
No one's checking it. Like that. I mean, honestly, just by adding someone with a watch, and it could have been, you know, the son. It could have been the youngest. It could have been like, it'd be like, son, what time is it? And, you know, it's 11:30. Fuck. You know, like, you know, time check. You know, people could just yell a time check and you could like tell the time, and then that builds something else because, you know, people are trying to like, and then you could have the watch break at some point. And they have no idea what time it is anymore. They can't even know. And especially at the end, like, there is no watch. And it's just the two of them standing there in the center with all these snake or lizard vampires around them. And they're kind of back to back. And then accidentally they shoot a wall and light comes in. And they're like, Dawn is here. You know, it's like, and that would have been a nice added. You only have to do it 3 times. Two checks and like 1 break of a watch. You're good.
And that first check could be right when they get there. Like, it could be while they're, like, before shit goes bad.
Yeah.
Because they're waiting on Carlos, and it could be like a, you know, I don't think they even established that like Carlos is supposed to be here at a certain time. He just says we're gonna meet here. So it could be something that like Carlos says he's gonna meet us here at midnight, and then, you know, as time goes on, you're like, well, there's no Carlos, and then stuff is really starting to hit the fan here as the night wears on. Like both of you have mentioned, like the dancers are weeding people out by taking them back to like private dance rooms, but they're not, you know, getting what they think they're getting killed. And, you know, then we can feel like, well, it's 3 a.m. and Carlos isn't here and there's vampires, so we've got X amount of time until the sun comes up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think in the end of the movie, though, Carlos does have a throwaway line that says, but you wanted to meet in the morning, so I had you meet me here, which is open from dusk till dawn. I think it's just a reason to say the line again, like the title of the movie again. So, but I think he did plan to meet him in the morning when the bar closed.
That's actually a thing I wish that we got earlier in the movie. Like, they say that they're meeting Carlos there, but there's no like scene where he's on the phone or something like that where we could like kind of get like, I realize that when we've got 3 Cheech Marins, like we have to space out when we see the Cheech Marins, so we can't have him like see the other side of that call. But I would like to get more kind of sense of why Dawn matters for this meetup. Like, for example, if he is going to be like the earliest he would get there is like 7 a.m. or something to that effect. You know, Dawn is a weird thing to say for casual human interaction.
Yeah.
Like, we exist with clocks, we exist with times. Like, we say, like, like, if I say I have to be someplace in the morning, I don't say I have to be there when the sun rises. I say I have to be there at 6:30.
At daybreak.
I have to be at work as the sun rises.
Yeah.
I will get up with the dawn.
When the cock crows, we'll leave this place. But it'd be nice to sort of like establish like, okay, well, we're gonna get out of here, but the reason why like he's not gonna be here until the morning. It's an 8-hour drive or something like that, or it's a 12-hour drive from where he is. He will get there as fast as he can. There's a train. You know, it should feel like the human world has these like artificial, very rigid kind of constructions. Again, time is this like linear breakdown that we impose on a cycle of day and night. And the vampire world having that sort of natural vibe of, preternatural, but of like the sun sets and they can come out and kill people, and then the sun rises and they have to go, slithering away. Like, those are where it's butting up against each other. And I would like more of the sense of why they happen to sync up in this scenario. Why does Clooney care about leaving at dawn versus at midnight?
Yeah.
What is the pushing factor there? Why does he have to wait for that point? Because they say like at some point before dawn, Carlos will show up and will be gone. Is I believe the line that he says, and I just would like more specificity there so that there feels like the cavalry might show up by that point outside of just the sun will rise. And then they don't.
Yeah.
Because, to me, like, before, like, if you're meeting a contact who is, like, known to be on the down low, like, he's not a good person, he's, helping you with your crime enterprises, like, it just seems like if someone said, oh, we're meeting him before dawn, I would think he's meeting, like, probably, between midnight and 3-ish in the morning at some, like, biker bar, like, that's still kind of before dawn. But the fact, I wouldn't think that, oh, I'm going to meet this contact at the skeevy bar at 7 a.m. Like, what, is he going to like waltz in with like an iced coffee? It just seems, it's like that kind of gets like, I don't know. I just feel like it doesn't doesn't make a lot of sense that he would be, unless, yeah, like they specified, like, oh, he is 8 hours away and he is rushing to get here and something like that. So we just have to like try to wait it out and hopefully he'll get here soon. Like even just like one of those fake, like, you know, one-sided conversation, like they grab a payphone. It's like, oh, okay, you're on your way. All right. See you when you get here.
Yeah.
Yeah. I now would like Cheech number 3 to show up with coffee though, just because.
Yeah, like now I'm wondering, like, I hadn't thought about this before, but what if Cheech 3 was the vampire boss? Like, what if they had never actually met him face to face, and he was like, "Come here." I don't know if this is necessarily better, but at the very least, it gives us like a structure for why he would be there, and like, sure, it's nice that it's just like, oh, I never really gave it much thought. It's just I saw this bar, I passed by it a bunch, but because like I, as a 37-year-old man, oh fuck, would not just voluntarily be like, oh, I'm just gonna be awake this whole time at a bar. Like I would be like, no, I've got an RV, I'm gonna be sleeping out there. Like I might go get some drinks and then come back and crash, but like why would I be like awake this whole time if you're just gonna meet me in the morning anyway?
Yeah, I mean there's no reason to meet like or be at the bar in the evening, if you know what I mean. Like if you're just gonna meet at 7 a.m. and you're meeting at 7 a.m. because nobody's there, you can just show up at 7 a.m. Like, unless the idea is to hide amongst lots of people and somehow, like, being in a crowd of people makes you feel safer than hiding alone in an RV somewhere. Not sure how that works, but I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine.
I think that was their logic, was that since they, you know, are wanted criminals, that... Not that, you know, Mexico doesn't have, like, a reputation for, like, sending criminals back necessarily. So I don't know, like, are the Mexican police even looking for them? Like, who would be... I mean, I just didn't really kind of get the full stakes of, like, it's one thing if maybe there was some indication that maybe, like, the Mexican cops are looking for them, because then there's even more stakes. Like, they need to hide out. Especially, like, this place is kind of, like, their people. They're tough guys. So if they can all kind of blend in together... in a place that, like, the cops don't really go to, that's, like, kind of, I don't know, like, their own little neck of the woods, it would make sense that maybe you should just stay there around, like, your own kind of people that, you know, there's lots of guns. You can't just be, like, taken quickly. It makes sense. But, yeah, if someone was like, oh, you need to be awake from, like, now till 7, I'd be like, hard pass. I will find a way to sleep for a few hours. Yeah, like if they just stayed in the RV in like the parking lot for a little bit, that is like an option. But obviously that's not a fun movie. It's just like a bunch of people awkwardly sleeping in an RV.
I wonder what's going on in there.
Also, none of us have neck tattoos, so we don't know. We don't know what you have to do in order to hide yourself when you have that kind of marker from the law when you're a criminal. It's a pretty established mark.
Yeah, I was actually reading this thing about like tattoo trends through history, and like a lot of tattoo artists were talking about how that tattoo like spurred on the like tribal tattoo armband craze that was popular in the 90s. Like it obviously like had traction before this, because clearly he's sporting it for a reason. But it was funny that it's like when they were like, oh, what's like the biggest trend from the 90s? They're like, oh yeah, the Clooney armband. That's that's the, you know, the up to the neck wasn't common because a lot of, you know, people don't have neck tattoos because you can't hide it as well. But it's just kind of funny that like this movie spurred on this like somewhat kind of mocked trend, you know, like, oh, remember back in the day, every guy had one of those like tribal tattoos.
Yeah, because even if that bar didn't have vampires, I wouldn't want to sleep there. I wouldn't want to fall asleep there. Like, I would have to be awake the whole time. And that sounds like hell. Maybe if it was more like a rest stop or like a brothel that had... Like
a hotel brothel.
Yeah, like it should feel like an old-timey kind of like Western bar where, like, you know, with like a madam and like that kind of vibe. Like where it's like, yeah, you're going to spend the night here with one of our girls. But, you know, we'll spend the night. Like, and that makes sense to spend the night at a location like that, as opposed to like if it's like a strip club bar. I really can't imagine being there without like going fucking insane for more than like 6 hours. And like if you're arriving at sunset and you have to be there until sunrise, that's awful.
Yeah.
What I also like about that is that that kind of bar, like what I'm imagining, like an Old West saloon kind of place, has more space. Like I feel like this set was very like, it kind of felt like there were like 3 rooms, and it's kind of like, could they really survive? Like, that's why your idea of going into a basement would be great. But if there's already an upstairs where their rooms are, right? And then the party's kind of separated, right? Because there's no way that Quentin Tarantino's character is going to stay in his room. Like, even though his brother's going to ask him to just stay put and lay low, he's still going to go down and make trouble because that's who he is. But, like, that gives you kind of, like, 2 floors, like real floors, like, and rooms and places for things to hide and people to hide. So it gives you a chance and an opportunity to kind of play with other forms of, you know, like a hide and go seek kind of format too later on. And also I always get really nervous when people, like the group that's supposed to survive gets separated. So that would add to the tension, you know, because like, you want to gather to protect each other. So, yeah, I think old-timey saloon-esque kind of bar with rooms and a madam would be best. I think that would be an improvement.
Yeah, just a second story would make this make so much more sense.
Well, that's my other pitch, if you don't mind me saying it. It's more, I guess, like,
Yeah, go for it.
less detail-oriented because I would be taking out a lot. I could also see this movie not having any supernatural elements at all. And it's like, I kind of have the opposite opinion of Sam and other like people who are big fans of this movie because of the bar. I kind of like struggle to pay attention as soon as like they kind of get their table and get situated, because I now, like, it's now on a rewatch, like I know what's coming, and it takes the real world stakes out of it, because, you know, part of the tension that might also be uncomfortable for, you know, non-horror fans with the opening is it's possible to be taken hostage by bank robbers or what have you. Like, they also have those 2 like blonde teenagers that are hostages that they thankfully let go. So it's like they have a total of like 6 hostages throughout this thing. And like, that's like real life horror. They've killed, like, they have, I think, at least 4 confirmed kills, if not more. So like that, especially since I like true crime and stuff, like you can kind of almost build like a criminal like profile on their motives and their behavior. And like, I just every time I know like it's gonna happen that, you know, Quentin is gonna kill the woman hostage, like I just feel like there's a part of me when, you know, she's kind of being yelled at by Seth, like, just keep your mouth shut and you'll survive. That's like rooting for her. Like, okay, she just knows that if she just like plays it safe for a few hours, she might get out of here alive. And that tension then gets, you know, kind of broken, or like your hope for her gets shattered. And then like when you're in the bar, you don't really have all that tension because it's just kind of ridiculous. It's like these, you know, lizard, snake, vampire women. And I'm not thinking, what would I do in that situation? I'm just like, I hope Quentin Tarantino gets killed in this scene because he's a vampire now. Like, you're kind of, yeah, it's taken out of that, like, true to life horror. So I could almost see, you know, and also especially writing it as, I don't know, have either of you seen Natural Born Killers? So what he did and didn't write is up for debate. But the first half of Natural Born Killers feels very similar to the first half of this movie, where it's, you know, a crime duo causing trouble. There's, you know, a diner scene, there's some banter, there's some, you know, violence. If we just kind of continue with that theme of like a duo, you know, in this case, a brother team, just trying to escape. And then, you know, if they think that their problem will be solved by jumping the border, but then, you know, maybe that kind of almost Thelma and Louise like pursuit continues, that maybe they don't know, like I mentioned earlier, that like the Mexican police got tipped off that there's 2 American like bank robbers coming their way, and maybe they want to like send them back for like a bounty, or even like, you know, a bounty hunter is coming after them, or that Carlos, like we've kind of hinted at, me like, you know, maybe he is going to do them dirty, and he's just sending them to this shitty biker bar to get like the crap beaten out of them so he can just like take the full loot and skedaddle. So I kind of want to keep like it's like, because clearly, you know, Quentin Tarantino just put his signature on top of this vampire movie, and it's like I kind of wish it's either all vampires or they even just remove the supernatural and it's just these two varying levels of horrible people trying to survive and see if they can, you know, beat out like a bounty hunter or whatever while, you know, keeping these hostages with them.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I like the idea of like Juliette Lewis's character trying to figure out these two awful men that have like taken her family hostage and like trying to figure out like what's the way to see tomorrow, kind of on that vibe, you know, like where it's like, well, they're awful and they might kill us, but maybe these other guys are even worse, you know, like what is happening with the vampires, but like where there's like a little bit more back and forth, because like once the vampire is introduced, you're like, well, obviously I am going to side with George Clooney in this situation. He has a gun, like, and they are monsters. Versus like if they're like gangsters or something like that, it's like it might go a different direction, or a crooked cop or something to that effect. You know?
Yeah, and I wanted more of the fact that Richie clearly hears people say things to him that aren't real. I didn't pick up on my first viewing, but the second viewing here, you know, he thinks the teller at the booze shop is mouthing "help me" to the cop, which he is clearly not, because we're watching that whole conversation and he never mouths anything. And at first I thought that was just him being evil, being like, oh, I want my brother to kill this guy because I don't like him, so I'm gonna just like rat on him. But then it turns out, like, after he like imagines Juliette Lewis like asking him to eat her out, they're just like, it's clear that he's like imagining people saying stuff. And I wish that like they go to a biker bar, like either, you know, vampires or no vampires, and he hears some dangerous dude say shit to him, and then now that is like the kickoff for the violence because he thinks this guy like, you know, swore at him but he didn't, and now like he has to get Seth to defend him and stuff like that. It's like I wanted his like clearly somewhat mental illness of like imagining conversations to like get the better of them.
Yeah, I wanted payoff too on that one. I thought that was going to make him more susceptible to the vampires or something, and we get none of that in the movie as it's written.
Yeah, I think it's just supposed to be like, oh, this guy's like a crazy sex fiend. I think that was like the whole point of the hearing voices that don't exist or hearing a person, like, as far as I know, because I used to work in mental health, so like as far as I know, there isn't like a disorder where you hear a person who's like actually turning and talking to you. Like you might hear their voice disembodied, but like that's clearly just movie magic. But it's like I think the reason Quentin put that in was just like to play up this guy is dangerous, not like this is going to be their downfall.
Which is interesting because later on, when Sex Machine is turning into a vampire, he does hear the vampires on the other side saying, like, whispering, like, kill them. And, like, that's kind of what, like, quickens his transformation, which is Harvey Keitel's character knows that it's going to take an hour specifically, which is very interesting. I don't know how he knew the number of, like, how he was going to turn. Again, there's no real time markers in the film, but they do use like this voice, like this, like the vampires are behind, and they like he starts hearing it, like instead of hearing the story, you're hearing them say that. So it is kind of interesting that they kind of use voices, like evil voices, to change one person, and that's something that happened to Tarantino before. I don't know. I feel like it's like one of those things where they drop the thread and kind of like, oh yeah, we can use this. This happens sometimes, you know?
Yeah. Again, that's like how the movie feels like two scripts are being mashed together rather than having a coherent thing. Sam, actually mentioning the hour thing for Harvey Keitel, so it's really inconsistent because like Frost like immediately transforms when he gets bitten, and I like that actually would have been a really interesting element to help pace out like how long the night is going. Is every time someone goes down to a vampire, when they show up an hour later, that means it's been an hour, so that that could have been a nice element. Again, the movie just doesn't really have a great sense of time throughout this whole thing. The actual night, the actual dusk till dawn happens very quickly, and I just wish it was spread out a bit more, or at the very least that we were given more of a sense for it. V, I like your idea of doing a non-vampire one. I think that could be a really cool script. The only catch on that one is that this script was originally written from the construction of being like, let's make a vampire movie.
Yeah, that's why that's my backup
So that's the only
to it.
Right. But I like all of these, and I think we all kind of were circling a similar kind of pitch for that reason, like where it's like we can all very clearly see how it could have worked a little bit better and been one movie instead of two, which a lot of people didn't like at the time. And even if you do like as your vibe, like it's a specific kind of one. Like you have to be like down for like that kind of like, oh, we're just gonna pivot. And it doesn't make it one coherent story. It's just two stories that happen between the same set of like opening and ending credits. So I don't know. I think we've all speculated pretty well on what we could do with this. I am shocked. I've never seen it where three of us have had like such a similar like basic pitch for a movie before, and I think that just sort of speaks to like the flaws with this movie being like so glaringly like this is exactly what needs to be done to make it kind of work a bit better. Like get to the bar, like flash back a little bit, deal with that stuff.
Yeah.
or totally rewrite this and make it a totally different kind of Tarantino movie. And have Robert Rodriguez gunplay in there. Like that actually would be a movie I would love to have seen back in the 90s. Like I don't think either of them are doing those kind of movies anymore, but man, like that would have been fun to have like a Tarantino written El Mariachi style movie.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Maybe about bad people. Like, imagine Rodriguez directing like Reservoir Dogs. That'd have been a lot of fun. And like this movie has a lot of those good vibes. Like I like the scene where Clooney is like, don't tell me that there are no vampires because like we're all dealing with vampires right now. Great fucking stuff. I love all of that. I like all these like really tense scenes that are in there, and I like the Rodriguez style gunplay. It's all fun stuff. I just wish it fit better together, but it doesn't. And people keep trying to make it work. Like there have been a lot of sequels. There are 2 sequels, and then there's a TV show that came off of it. I've heard the TV show's pretty good. The sequels are apparently really bad. I don't think anyone's really surprised because they were direct-to-video movies, and that's just like, eh. But it clearly has a cool aesthetic. Like the sort of like Mexican vampire vibe is like pretty cool. So yeah, I don't know. It's a property that I think has a lot of fans for a reason, but it's a cult kind of fandom, and would have been fun if it was a true classic, but it's not quite up there. It's got mixed reviews. It did fine because it was super cheap, but it's not. And apparently, it launched neck tattoos. Like, but it's no one's favorite Tarantino movie. It's no one's favorite vampire movie. It's just it's a perfectly fine one that has all the flaws that the creators put in all their works. Yeah. So V, I feel like we're done talking about this movie. Why don't we talk about you?
Yeah. All right. So for social media, I am at TWriteRepeat on Twitter and Instagram. That's TAWRITE Repeat. And you can get my novel Shadowcast on Amazon. It is a dark psychological thriller about a true crime podcaster who is trying to find her friend who went missing back in high school. And I've got 3 short stories that are available. Exit 13, January release, and Legacy Employees also can be found exclusively on Kindle.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for coming back on. Sam, where can people find you?
They can find me here. And I am checking the Discord more. So, I guess, I will try to respond to you there. And nowhere else, because I actually am a figment of Case's imagination. And when I answer you on the Discord, it's just really Case answering you. And...
right, she's the voices that I hear in my head because I'm Tarantino.
Exactly, except I don't make Case hurt anyone. More likely, or maybe just himself. Get an extra piece of cake case. Oh my god, cake case. That's a tongue twister. But yeah, otherwise you can find Case at...
As Sam mentioned, you can find me on the Discord. Check that out. You can find it at certainpov.com, where we have great conversations. We're having this call right now on Discord, but you can also just share memes, chat about your favorite movies, comics, books, whatever. Lots of great conversations. Again, find that link at certainpov.com. You can find the podcast on Twitter at Another Pass. You can find me on Twitter at Case Aiken. And yeah, we're doing tons of fun stuff. So stay tuned. Sam, what are we actually talking about next time?
Next time we'll be talking about Highlander 2, The Quickening. But until then, if you enjoyed this, pass it on.
Thanks for listening to Certain Point of View's Another Pass podcast. Don't miss an episode. Just subscribe and review the show on iTunes. Just go to certainpov.com.
Cool. Yeah, there's only one time where someone not wearing earbuds saved the day, which was when I did Everybody Wants Some, and for whatever reason my file got corrupted and we lost all my audio. Oh, no. But Hans was my guest on that one, and he had it turned up so loud that you could hear me perfectly clearly on his audio track. And I was like, oh wow.
Perfect.
Yay.
Huzzah!
Craig stayed with us this whole time.
Wow, what?
I can't remember the last time that happened.
No, it's a Dusk Till Dawn miracle.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.